Go. Good evening. Can you all hear me? Nobody said anything, so I'm assuming nobody said I can't hear you. So, I just wanted to thank you all for coming. I know it's a beautiful evening in Seward, and it's pretty amazing that all of you came out to see this tonight, to be with us tonight. I wanted to, tonight, I'm Brian Hickey, and I'm the general manager of the electric department for the city. Just a little bit about me. I've been working in the rail belt for 40-some years. Started working at Municipal Light and Power in the late 80s. I worked construction in the rail belt, line construction in the 70s, and worked at MLMP in the 80s, and then went to Chugach for a long time and retired there a few years ago. And since then, I worked for all of the utilities for about a year and a half or 2 years, getting grant funding for the second intertie between the Kenai and Beluga, the $206.5 million grant. And then I've been down here helping Cat out. Taylor's doing all the work, and I just try to let him do what he needs to do. So that's sort of my background. Tonight, I think, is about Seward and the future of your electric utility, of our electric utility, of your electric utility. Our goal in this process that we're kicking off tonight is to make sure that every ratepayer has the ability, the voice, and the opportunity to help shape the future of this utility. Tonight's the beginning of a transparent and open process that we anticipate running probably through late spring or early summer. And during that process, we will have 2, maybe 3 more of these town halls. And the objective there is to help the community come together to figure out how you're going to meet your energy needs in the future. And those are, the key things obviously are, we want stable and predictable rates, sustainability of energy and fuel supply. So our objective in this process is to get your feedback to help come together and decide how we're going to move this utility forward. So we really encourage questions from you. Tonight, later, there will be a panel discussion, and come up and ask the hard questions, and if we don't know the answers tonight, we will get them for you and have them at the next town hall. If we know the answers, obviously we'll answer the questions. We want to explore how to keep the electricity safe with stable and predictable rates and reliable. And we also want to look at, are there ways that we can maintain local control, or are we willing to kind of push that off into the broader rail belt utility environment? So with that, I think I'm going to have Kat come up and make a few comments, and then I'll introduce kind of the lay of the land, and we'll bring Clay up.
Thank you, Brian. I will admit I don't actually have too much to add to that. I think the key for tonight is to have an open, transparent conversation about Seward's electric utilities future. I appreciate you all for squeezing in next to the Sekuliak. I know it's a fun environment to kind of sit in here and see all of the different people in Seward and all the different aspects of Seward and how it all comes together. So I'm really excited to hear what everybody has to say tonight. This is not a meeting for decisions or announcements. It's one to share, listen, and bring all of our collective knowledge about what this community needs and what this community wants and how we bring that into the future. So I appreciate you all for coming out tonight. I appreciate all of the speakers for coming in. I appreciate Brian and Taylor, and I'm really excited about charting these next steps together. So with that, I will sit down. Yeah, back to Brian.
Thanks. So kind of the lay of the land and where we're going moving forward. Really there are 3 options that the community has as to what to do with their electric utility. First, you could try to continue to operate it as a municipal utility as you have in the past. I know the utility started, I think, in 1909 or 1913, and I think they signed their first contract with Chugach in 1971, so going way back. But that's one alternative. The other alternative is to sell the utility to one of the other cooperatives in the rail belt Likely that would either be Homer, Chugach, or Matanuska. And I think you all were involved, many of you may have been involved in the sale attempt that happened a few years ago. You know, and once again, I'll emphasize what we really want to see is, what we really want to do is have an open process where we get your feedback and understand what the community wants to do in that regard. And the last option is to form a cooperative of your own here down in this region. I don't think that's been explored as much as maybe the sale or the maintenance of the status quo previously. And so tonight, we're going to have three folks from cooperatives. We have Clay Copeland from Cordova Electric, Linda Freed from Kodiak Electric, and Jamie Matthews from Copper Valley Electric. So if you're not familiar, Copper Valley Electric covers Valdez, Glen Allen, sort of that area in the Copper Valley. Cordova's obviously the Cordova area, and Linda's from Kodiak Island. So we're going to have each of them come up, and they're going to tell their cooperatives or their community's story about energy for about 15 minutes each. And then with that, let me introduce Clay Copeland. Clay is a licensed professional electrical engineer. He served on the city council in Cordova. Let me back up. This is what he has written here, but he grew up on the Kenai. He grew up on the west side, grew up on the Kenai, did some commercial fishing out of Seward a number of years ago. He got an engineering degree, was with Kodiak Electric as a staff engineer. He's a registered professional engineer, and then he went to Cordova as the CEO over there. He's also well known on the federal scene. He does a lot of work with the Department of Energy in DC, and he's a member of the Alaska Energy Authority's board of directors. So, Clay, tell your story. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. It's great to be here. It's been a while since I've been to Seward. Spent many a 4th of July here and lived in Kenai, so really enjoyed the scenic beauty of Seward. In many ways, it's similar to Cordova. I think what I can most share, and I'm really interested in hearing your questions and just having a conversation, is that Cordova was actually started as a private utility, Cordova Power and Light, kind of like Seward. Then it was operated as a municipal utility for about 30, 40 years. And then back in the late 70s, city was struggling to keep the lights on. They managed many departments. They had a telephone utility, electric utility, Parks and Rec, Harbor, so forth, and a roads department, and decided water, sewer, garbage, and decided as a community that they weren't investing enough in the electric utility. They moved to rolling blackouts in the 70s, and the community really felt like that was unacceptable. And as a seafood port, they were concerned about their seafood processors not having a stable, reliable source of energy. So citizens got together, organized, incorporated as a electric cooperative, borrowed very low interest money from the Rural Utility Service, and purchased the utility from the city. And really, I mean, Cordova Electric's a very high-performing utility right now, I think, have made some fortunate investments, had a lot of help from other cooperatives and utilities, including some here in the rail belts and some smaller ones. And really, though, the goal of the community was they wanted to have control of their energy future. So for Cordova, they really wanted to have locally sourced energy so they weren't exposed to storms, to ship fuel in, and so forth. Shortly after forming a cooperative, they voted to deregulate. So instead of having the regulatory commission decide when they should lower and raise rates and how much, and having an expensive legal process to make that case, and then wait 12 to 18 months to have their rates established. They really wanted to be self-directed and self-controlled. And I think it's worked out really well for Cordova as a cooperative. You know, we invested in hydro plants at a time, frankly, when diesel fuel was very inexpensive, and it was very expensive to build a new hydro. But ultimately, our rates have been so stable for so long that we've slowly approached kind of parity with some of the larger utilities, even on the rail belt. Reliability, one of the most reliable grids in the world. We have a real it's highly automated, but in a way that is fairly simple, and kind of took the operators out of babysitting the equipment and allowed us to invest in their skills so that we do most of our work in-house. We install and operate and rebuild our own engines. We build our own distribution system. The utility decided to convert the entire system to underground. We aren't on a road system where we can get help from neighboring utilities, so sometimes it would take us days to get the power back on. And as a community, we decided underground power lines would be a lot better. So we got that whole system converted in 2011, and it's maybe a couple 15 or 20-minute system-wide outages a year on average. And for our seafood processors and our businesses, as they get more automated and dependent on new technologies, it's important for them to have real stable, reliable power as well. So there's a lot of details, a lot of transactions. You know, it's not easy or quick to make a big move sometimes. And, you know, there's transfer of assets and plants and land and financial transactions. But, you know, speaking, you know, as mayor and having worked on the city side as a city council and working closely with the city manager in the city of Cordova now as a partner, I mean, we're co-developing a water and hydro plant because the community is too small for every organization to be out doing their own thing. So we work really closely with the city, and if we're going to make a big investment, we want to make sure that it can meet as many of the community's needs as possible. Our recreational, educational, community water needs, and energy needs. And so that's how we try to package and work. So I really don't have a lot more than that, just that we've kind of been through this transition. There's a lot of deep resources in forming an electric cooperative. It turns out that's how most of the country was electrified. So the federal government set up a real kind of cookbook process for how to manage a cooperative. Everything from standard construction manuals to standard accounting, and it's nothing you have to reinvent. So as far as the admin side and trying to develop a good utility structure, that was already in place for us. And then the National Electric Cooperative Association has almost 1,000 electric cooperatives now. So there's just a deep pool of resources between the other cooperatives and the national organization to have training, different structures, policies. We very seldom have to develop anything from scratch because there's other cooperatives that have probably already done it, and try to share each other's successes and mistakes so that we can repeat the successes and not repeat the mistakes. Yes?
Could you explain how your hydro plant works?
So we have 2 run-of-the-river hydroelectric projects. In the 2 locations that were real suitable hydro sites close to town, the geology really wasn't good for building a dam storage, just really super deep gravel and kind of weak sedimentary rock. And so we built surface structures where we just kind of basically take the river and divert it into a pipeline. Both of these are very, very productive salmon rivers, but both of them have waterfalls in them. So if you take the water, divert the water out of the river into your pipeline and down to a power plant at the base of the falls, you're not impacting the stretch of the river where the salmon are rearing and breeding. It also really shortens the distance and the cost. So the advantage of a run-of-the-river is that it's a lot less expensive to build. And environmentally, it's almost unparalleled because you're letting all the sticks and leaves and gravel flow through the river system just like it always has. The downside is that you're not storing that energy for the winter months when you really need it. As those rivers freeze up, it gets to a point where in March and April, sometimes we're approaching 100% diesel. So in the summer, we have a lot of excess hydropower, and actually it was being able to offer very strong incentives to our seafood industry that brought all that seafood processing onshore. And so we built a 6 megawatt project when we had a 4 megawatt peak, and we already had a 1 megawatt project. So once the seafood processors kind of paid their monthly bill, everything after that was 6 cents a kilowatt hour. That brought all the seafood processing onshore from the floating processors and started generating about $1 million a year, both for the state of Alaska and the city of Cordova in raw fish tax revenues that we hadn't seen before. The other thing about a cooperative that's a little different in the models, so, you know, the three models, a private or investor-owned utility, an electric cooperative, and a city. Cities mostly fund through bonding. Cooperatives mostly fund through borrowing. And there are two large cooperative banks that are also cooperatives. So they offer competitive rates, but then you get capital credits in return. You get equity returned to you because they're a nonprofit. And then the private sector generally finances through equity and so forth. So a cooperative is a not-for-profit, so when you generate excess margins, you return those to the ratepayers. And we got financially healthy enough in 2018 that we started returning about $300,000 to $450,000 a year. So we've already returned over $2 million to the ratepayers in capital credits over the last few years. And this last year, for the residential rate class, many of them have paid their first 2 months of their electric bill. And those are the highest cost months of the year, January and February, when we're using a lot of diesel. So did that answer your question? Okay, man. And again, I can take deeper dives on some of these when we get to questions and answers. Yes? Yeah, so our tiered rates are right about start at 30 cents a kilowatt hour, and then you pay your meter fee in the residential class, and then they drop, 22 cents. So an all-in electric rate kind of varies between 30 and 35 cents a kilowatt hour. And then again, some of that gets returned to you. We do. And this is a nice thing. This ties back to not being regulated by the Regulatory Commission. Our seafood processors came to us and said, hey, we really want to expand our processing season and grow our business in Cordova, and what would really help is some help in the winter. So we said, okay, it's good for your rate class, but also heat pumps are where you have a big winter demand and we're on diesel. So we just put an incentive rate in place for our residential and our commercial and our seafood processors, that once you used a certain block of power, it drops to 6 cents plus whatever diesel pass through there is. And for almost all the homes in the community, once you add a heat pump, you're going to get over that 1,000 kilowatt hours, and you're going to get a more attractive rate. But frankly, even with our base rates, the heat pumps pencil out pretty nicely.
If I could just, we are going to have a Q&A with the panel here, but we have two folks waiting on the Teams meeting to do presentations. And if we could.
I'm not going anywhere.
Just hold your questions for a little bit here, and then we'll just have a Q&A. We should have about 45 minutes to an hour to just have a conversation. That'd be great if you could do that.
But thank you for the question.
But thank you, yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, so, we'll back up here. Okay, I got it. So next up is Linda Freed. Linda is a board member at Kodiak Electric. She started with the Kodiak Island Borough as a planner. After about 20 years, she moved down the hall to the city of Kodiak as their city manager. She's involved in a whole lot of community things in Kodiak, and she also serves as the president of the Alaska Power Association board. So, Linda, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, very good. I
Take
apologize.
it away, Linda.
Thank you. I apologize for not being there tonight. I had another commitment that I couldn't really rearrange. So thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the Kodiak Electric Association, or KEA. KEA is an electric cooperative and one of the first electric cooperatives formed in Alaska prior to statehood in the early 1940s. The cooperative was formed about the same time that the city of Kodiak was officially incorporated. KEA is governed by an elected board of 9 directors, and it's interesting to note that per our bylaws, no person is eligible to become or remain a director if they are serving in an elected public office. This bylaw section was clearly directed at members of the Kodiak City Council, but it now applies to elected Kodiak Island Borough Assembly members. The intent was to keep the co-op separate from local government. All 9 directors are elected at large, with 3 directors standing for election each year. So we rotate through all 9 positions. KEA serves an area significantly larger than the city of Kodiak. Our service area covers the entire Kodiak area road system, which includes the United States Coast Guard base, which is the largest in the country, and the community of Port Lions, located off the Kodiak road system. A member of the U.S. Coast Guard serves as an ex officio member of our board of directors. The board meets monthly, and we hold our annual membership meeting in April of each year. Co-op members can attend the monthly board meetings and are given the opportunity to comment if they wish to do so. In addition to our monthly board meetings, we have 2 standing committees, Engineering and Technology and Budget and Policy, and this is where a lot of the work of our co-op gets done. Each board member serves on one of the 2 standing committees, and the board chair unofficially serves on both. As board members, we also make sure we're available to our members for information sharing. It's a small town, not quite as small as Seward, but a lot of people in town know each other, and people are not shy about asking questions if they have them. In addition, board members also serve with associated organizations, and as Brian said, for example, I am the KEA representative to the Alaska Power Association. Most electric cooperatives in the state of Alaska are regulated by the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, as Clay had mentioned. However, several decades ago, the membership of KEA saw the value in regulating ourselves, and we also voted to deregulate. This means that virtually all co-op decisions are locally made by community members that have been elected by our co-op members. Historically, like Cordova, our electricity was provided by diesel generation. Now our diesel generators serve as backup for our 100% renewable system. Roughly 80% of our electricity is generated by our hydroelectric plant, and 20% is generated by our 6 wind turbines. We also have a small battery backup system and a flywheel that powers our container crane, and these are both tied into the system. Our hydro plant was originally constructed and owned by the state of Alaska in the early 1980s. After several decades of effort and negotiation, Kodiak Electric Association became the proud owner of the Tara Lake Hydroelectric Plant, the only hydroelectric facility located in a national wildlife refuge. Initially, the plant was constructed with 2 turbines, but a 3rd turbine was added a while back. And in addition, the cooperative has increased the water in our reservoir with a tunnel that diverts water from a secondary watershed into the reservoir. We're currently focusing on our wind plant, as the components are starting to reach the end of their useful life. We've used a variety of funding opportunities to improve our physical assets. For many years, we had rates that were higher than the mainland road system. However, due to our board and staff's diligence, we now have residential rates that are lower than most of the rail belt, even with a rate increase that we implemented this past April. This was the first rate increase KEA has had in approximately 20 years, and we haven't heard any complaints about the increase. Our members seem to have recognized the need for this particular increase as we were having difficulties with the fishing industry. We have a number of programs that we've implemented to assist our members. We have a meter replacement credit, an electric home conversion credit, and an electric vehicle credit. In addition, we've worked with the Kodiak Ellenboro School District to implement an interruptible electric rate that can provide savings to the school district and allows KEA to sell excess energy when it's available. The community is proud of our locally owned and operated electric utility. A number of our processors are marketing their fish as processed using 100% renewable power, and the community members look at our wind turbines with pride. And I'll be happy to answer any questions when we get to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next up is Jamie Matthews, and Jamie is the CEO of Copper Valley Electric, which covers the territory from Valdez north up to Glen Ellen and a bit further north. Jamie was prior to being awarded the CEO job, she was the Chief Financial Officer for Copper Valley. She has 25 years of experience in the Alaska electric utility industry. She has an MBA from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and Education in Business Management, Finance and Cooperative Leadership. Copper Valley owns and operates 2 FERC-licensed hydroelectric projects at Solomon Gulch and Allison Creek. And Jamie serves as a primary contact with FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, for both projects. In 2022, Jamie was awarded the Hatcher Williams Turkington Employee Award, which recognizes employees of APA's member utilities who provide exemplary service to their employers. And James Unring was awarded that award this year at the APA conference in Cordova. And I actually was a former awardee of that award many years ago. Jamie's highly involved in the statewide organization, the Alaska Power Association. In fact, I met her back in DC at their annual fly-in. She's the treasurer and vice chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. She chaired the committee for 6 years and served on the committee for 12 years, and she also served for Governor Dunleavy on the Real Estate Commission of Alaska from 2019 to 2023. So Jamie, take it away. And she has a PowerPoint for you.
You hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, good evening. Thank you for the introduction, Brian. Happy to be here tonight. You know, as my introduction, it's kind of a small world. I grew up in Cordova and actually started my career for Cordova Electric as a meter reader in high school. That shows you just how far, you know, it goes back in relationships and community. And I think Clay said it, you know, as small co-ops, we share information. And I always say, if you're reinventing the wheel, you're working way too hard because there's 850 other co-ops in the U.S. and we all work together. So tonight I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Copper Valley. If you can see it, this is just a map of kind of our boundaries. So we are an isolated grid. We serve pretty much Glenallen to Valdez, but we actually go west towards Palmer. Our lines actually are fairly close together. But it's a lot to connect just because of the voltage. So we serve mainly Valdez, Copper Basin. We have 2 offices in Valdez and Glenallen. And I like to say our service territory is about the size of West Virginia. It's about 160 miles north to south and about 120 miles east to west. So size of West Virginia, we serve over 4,000 customers and have about 260 miles along the Richardson Highway. So in total, we have about 540 miles of line. We have 9 substations, 5 of our own generating facilities, and we have about 40 megawatts of generating capacity. So the biggest thing for us about 4 years ago is our strategic plan, and just kind of keeping this high level. We have 5 strategic goals: being the employer of choice, building financial strength, focusing on system reliability, which I'll talk about a little bit later, reducing our dependence on diesel fuel, and then becoming an advocate for our members. And we do that in several ways. When I became CEO, what I will say is I'm not a politician. I have a CFO background, and I created what we call this legislative brochure. It really just hits the highlights, and we can share this with you later on. We have 45 Alaska employees, and it just talks a little bit about our whole territory. So I use it when we go to Juneau, when I go to DC. I actually share it from a community perspective because I say all of our relationships, and the city of Valdez is included in our service territory for us, is we all go to DC, we all go to Juneau. Let's be saying the same message on energy because everything relies on stable, reliable, affordable energy. So again, this brochure just talks about how we produce power. We are 100% hydro from about May to October, which our rates are fairly, I would say not cheap, some would say, but we're priced really cheaper than some of the other utilities in Alaska that are on the rail belt. Our challenge is in the winter time, when we're generating about 70% with fuel, our rates can nearly double depending where fuel costs are. So the second side of the brochure just talks about our big projects, what we support efforts to, who our major members are. Right now, really, our big project is we are getting ready. Currently, we do not serve or are connected to the Alyeska Valdez Marine Terminal, so where the pipeline ends. But we are close within a few months of actually exchanging power. And overall, this really benefits us by reducing fuel for our members. So when we go to Juneau, really our main messages in DC as well is addressing just the high cost of fuel just for our utility, but Alaska, addressing the high cost of regulation. So for our small utility, we spend quite a bit of money because we have a high hazard dam. So we spend a lot in regulation. And then we support any connection to the rail belt grid and just talk about hydro development. So just to go into a little more details on, CVEA as far as governance, similar to other utilities that presented tonight, we became self-regulated, what we like to call it, in 1998 when our board voted out of regulation, meaning we are not regulated by the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. What that looks like for us is we adopted our tariff. And so even though our board is our governing body, there is a public process to change the tariff. So this is just an image. We went through that process earlier this year. It's not just rates, but it's processes for construction. It's other things. Most utilities have a tariff. For us, we are one of the rare. We actually have an even member board. Never had an issue with it, but we have 4 board members from the city of Valdez and 4 board members from the Copper Basin. So it just ensures that interest of all members, are taken into consideration. We have 3-year terms for our board members that rotate and no term limits, and we do monthly board meetings. For financing, we do not borrow money from our federal government. There's, as mentioned earlier, several sources. We are actually 100% borrower from what we call CFC, which is one of the co-op banks. This just gives us some discounts because they're a co-op and we get that patronage back just like we give it to our members. So that has been a benefit, but we look at all areas. For example, when we were financing a new hydro, we put that out to bid and considered going back into government financing. So still the financial flexibility. We've received several grants, various federal state appropriations, money through the Renewable Energy Fund, hydro incentive funding federally. So we continue, just like anyone else, to apply for what grants apply to our infrastructure. Our rate structure, we have the traditional residential, small commercial, large commercial, and industrial. We actually serve the Petrostar refinery, so we do have the refinery load. And mostly our large commercial, we have seafood processors as well here in Valdez. These are just listed some of our major CVA consumers. We have a Providence Medical Center here. We have a Coast Guard base, several Native organizations, government meters, and just overall, UAF has a high active auroral research project, is our load in the Copper Basin. So pretty diverse membership, and we have an annual meeting once a year, and we get a lot of questions as well. Very open, transparent. I do meetings, we call it coffee with the CEO, but just allowing members to come in and ask questions and just have an open and transparent process. Just to hit a little bit of highlight on reliability, for our isolated grid, very proud last year. We like to say 99.9% reliability. Your lights are on 99.9% of the time. It looks different depending what area you live in. But for us, that was a pretty high achievement. A lot of the distribution-only co-ops in the U.S. who don't even generate their own power strive for that. So it's not to say outages don't happen, but we really keep that into focus to make priorities of reliability. We've put a lot of money towards our right-of-way clearing and really just addressing our aging infrastructure. Similar to Kodiak, we're a little bit older. We were incorporated in 1952, mostly diesel up until the early 80s when we had our hydro project. So definitely right now, that's our big focus, is addressing our aging infrastructure and what we have. Small utility, so again, size of West Virginia, when we're fully staffed, we have 7 linemen that cover that entire service territory. So we do have crews on hand. We haven't had to, knock on wood, in the last year, but we have had big storm years where we've had to bring in bigger crews for help. So another example of just how co-ops work together to keep the lights on. And the last slide, just member engagement. I showed you our legislative brochure. We keep a pulse on our membership as well. Member surveys every 3 years. We went to a digital newsletter that's pretty interactive with members. We're big with Facebook. We're, again, looking at that, kind of tweaking, but our Facebook has a live feed to our web page as well, just for those members that don't have Facebook, and do a lot of community stuff. That's part of, being a co-op, is that community kind of vision and principle. We do school presentations, tours. We don't have any form of government in the Copper Basin, so we are actively participating in the Copper Valley Chamber of Commerce. And then, as I mentioned, the city of Valdez. So one of the kind of unique things with us, we have a communication director, and one of her direct roles is to attend the city council meetings. So it just keeps the pulse for any business as it relates to the electric utility. And we have an outgoing communication director who retires in January, but Sharon Scheidt actually served as the mayor as well for 2 terms. So again, just really keep that relationship, flow, so we can keep the communication open and just keeping all that going. So that's all I had. Shared my contact information, but again, happy to be part of the Q&A panel. I do want to mention, Brian, just on Teams, we cannot hear the question from whoever is in the crowd, so it might just be if you could repeat the question for Linda and I if we have to.
All right, thank you, Jamie. That was a great PowerPoint. Kind of feeling bad about not making one myself now. But so I'm going to give everyone, or I should start, in case you don't know me, my name is Taylor Crocker. I'm the operations manager for the City of Seward Electric Department. I was sitting at my computer this morning and coming up with a 5-minute speech on all the projects that we've been doing. So I logged into the computer and I realized that we were at about 200. And so anyway, we're gonna just pare it down a little bit because I didn't want to keep you here all night. But I want to give a special thank you to the crews in Seward and all the hard workers that we have in our department. The stuff would never be possible if they didn't come to work every day and keep the focus on the community. So some of our major capital projects, we're doing a transmission upgrade. So some people have probably seen some surveying off Nash Road. So we got the final 2 miles to do from the Seward Highway up to Sawmill Creek. So that'll be a complete replacement from 69 kV up to 115. We got 2 substations to rebuild, the Long substation out at the base of Trail Lake and the Spring Creek substation across the bay. And then we're doing those projects in order to capitalize on our $50 million EPA shore power grant for a shore power substation that also comes with a 12 megawatt 2-hour battery energy storage system that we'll be putting down near the old coal yard. So anyway, that's just the first $70 million worth of upgrades we have to complete. And then we get into improving our data and system knowledge. So as an operations manager, I like to make data-driven decisions when it comes to maintenance planning, and that helps with rates and everything. So who in here got the postcard for the Alaska Remote Imaging survey of our area? 3 people? Okay. Well, anyway, Ruben's been hard at work going to every pole on our system, every junction box, every transformer to log it in our GIS system. So this is going to give us better data on our assets in the field, the condition of those assets, and then it's going to allow us to go and add more data to it over the winter with the line crew. So that's one thing we're doing. Our GIS system itself got upgraded, so now we have an electric utility enterprise system through Esri. And so once we get all this better data in the system, when we have outages and stuff, the linemen are going to be able to trace the lines back to the next protection. And when we get the AMI meter system, which is actually next on my list, but that whole thing will show up on our GIS system. So when we have an outage come up, we can just see it in real time, who's out, and figure out what the culprit is, and send the line crew to that point first. So then that leads me into the AMI metering upgrade. Friday, Kat sat in for me to sign off on these 3 RFPs that came in. We have about a month-long evaluation process, but we have 3 industry-leading companies that, hopefully we can afford. We have to get to that point still. But if we get the AMI meters, then we're hoping that every one of you can sit on your phone and see your usage in real time, pay your bill in real time, and we'll be able to use the data that comes back from the AMI meters to basically run a never-ending rate study so we can make sure everyone's rates are fair and equitable across the grid and that you're getting the power for the best price possible. And then workforce and local hire development. So has anyone in here met our new utility clerk or utility billing specialist? Few people? Okay, so I don't know how we did it, but we ended up with the best team ever. And so we got Matt and Blake working up front now, and they took some North Star training, and they have been finding any error they can find in North Star and fixing it, working with customers, working with payment plans, just everything to help our customers out. So I'm really happy that we were able to get 2 excellent employees up front. Now for the lineman side, we have 3 excellent employees, but we've had another job opening for 24 months now. And so we're thinking there's got to be some other avenues that we can take. So we got the new bargaining unit contract, but we're working on hiring a local apprentice. So we can basically hire an apprentice, maybe a kid out of high school or AvTech, and then send him up to the IBW's 4-year apprenticeship so then he can come back to Seward. So trying to get, hire local, and maybe they'll come back and want to stay local with us. The other thing I'm doing is kind of stealing from Clay a little bit, but they've got a deal for their operator mechanics and training to go through a degree style program at Penn Foster University while they're working on the job. So it's distance learning education. But for 4 years, they get to learn everything you need to know about being an operator mechanic in a utility. And so we're working with Penn Foster right now. The issue, it's not really an issue, but so you send them a job description. So in Seward, our operator mechanic job description is a substation technician, a plant operator, a plant mechanic, a heavy equipment operator, a vehicle maintenance technician, and really anything else under the sun. So when I sent that job description off to Penn Foster, they're like, "Is this one job description?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's one job description." But they're doing a pretty good job putting that together, and then we're hoping to work with the union to make that happen. And then aligning with industry standards. We're working with a consultant to get our accounting over to the uniform system of accounts so we can better report how a utility works with the rest of the utilities. So we'll be able to line up with all the rest of them. That'll probably be a topic for a longer discussion, but just wanted to let you know what's happening. And then vegetation management, AK Tree Service has been working since January this year. They took a break and went up to Golden Valley for a while, and now they came back. So they're working by Kenai Lake right now, and the right-of-ways are looking great, everything they've touched. If you've been following what we've been doing, we got the software called Overstory, so we can manage in real time, sending AK Tree Service to the worst areas based on a satellite survey we had done. And then we can also track their progress, because every time they clear a span, they mark it as clear, and that comes back. So to date, and this is with them logging 30-inch trees, but we've gotten 14.6 miles of our transmission cleared year to date. And we still have funding for a couple more months. But on that, I think I hit everything. There's a lot more that's going on that I just didn't mention. But I know that everyone wants to get to the community Q&A, because that's why you came. And so you can either come up and ask your questions, and if there's a specific person you want to ask, just call us out. If you don't know their names, you can, by what they're wearing or whatnot. But if you don't want to come up to the microphone, you can also submit a written question on a card to be read out loud. And I think those cards over there. But so just feel free to ask any of us your questions. If we know the answers, you're going to get it tonight. If we don't know the answers, we'll do our best and look it up. We can post it on Facebook or get back to you at the next town hall meeting. So on that, am I missing anything? Kick it off? All right.
So, hello, my name is Shauna Toma. I'm with Northern Compass Group, and we're helping out with the event tonight. And one thing we need to do is just ask questions in the microphone because our folks on Zoom can only hear if we use the microphone. So if you just want to walk up here, or you can pass a question up on a card, we'll be happy to take those. So come on up.
Hi, we haven't heard at all about the results of the survey that some of us may have filled out this spring. Can somebody address that? How many respondents and trends, if it was worthy of talking about? Thank you.
Are we on? Great. Sure. We had an excellent response to the survey. I believe we had almost 500 folks responded to it. So we had, and there were about half from inside city limits and half were from outside city limits. There were 4 or 5 primary topics that they, that are important to the folks who filled out the survey. And they are stable and predictable rates. Let me back up and say number 1. An open and transparent process for whatever we're going to do going forward. We got that message loud and clear. I believe almost every respondent said we need an open and transparent process, and tonight is the kickoff for that open and transparent process. So that stable and predictable rates, reliability. Help me out here. I've got them in my notes.
Yeah.
Hand me my notes there. Then I could just answer it right off the. Those are resumes. Transparent governance, they wanted equitable representation, so both within and without the city. People, interestingly, both inside the city limits and outside the city limits felt that people outside the city limits should have representation on the utility. So I thought that was an interesting finding. And those are really the top 4 that came out of the survey. What we will be doing is an additional survey later on, or probably in the spring. So what we're trying to do is engage the whole community. We really want you to ask questions, and we want your feedback, and we'll check back with you maybe March with another survey to see if we're hearing what you're saying or if you're not getting the information you need. And so we intend to continue this survey operation. Go ahead.
I'd like to add too, one of the interesting things that I saw in the survey results, and we have an October 13th work session planned with the city council where we're gonna present the results in total as they come through as well, just so we can be open and transparent with that process as well. But one of the interesting things that I found there was we asked a direct question of, would you be interested, or what do you see as the future of the electric utility? And we said co-op, keep, sell to a utility, or I need more information. And 50% of the results were I need more information. So I think that's a really good thing to add to Brian's point is we'll come back around in March with a follow-up, or I don't want to pigeonhole us into March, but we'll come back around after we have an open and transparent process, and hopefully that 40-50% goes down to 0%, because the whole purpose is to have more information.
And there is a kind of a range of tools that we're going to use over the coming months. We'll have 2, maybe 3 more of these town hall meetings. We'll have other leaders from Alaska utilities to kind of give you an idea of what they're doing in other places. We'll have flyers, infographics, and potentially some short videos that maybe explain some of the more complex concepts in lay terms. And like I said, surveys that will kind of let us check the temperature and check your temperature and check the effectiveness of the process that we're running. With the idea that sometime, late spring, early summer, the community is coalesced around something that they believe we can carry forward, and then we would put that on a ballot and have an election and see where it went.
We're not.
Or not, yeah.
One thing you can do to make sure you are on the mailing list, either your mail at home or P.O. box here or out of state or your email, is to fill out just a little card with your information. It won't be sold to anyone. It's just for these folks to be able to send you information and keep you informed of what's going on. Emails are great. We don't have that many of people's emails in Seward. And also, just if you want to get postcards or mailings at home, just fill out a little card. And we're going to have a drawing. If you turn your information in tonight, there's a door prize. Why not? All right, go ahead.
Tim McDonald, candidate for mayor. I think the electrical utility is doing a great job myself. The problems that everybody's concerned about are above them. It's more policy, fairness, and money. You know, the city's pulling, this year they pulled $2.3 million out of the electrical utility fund. 1.3 went into the general fund and 1 million went to something else. So, you know, that's $2.3 million. We've got about 2,300 utility customers. That's $1,000 a piece right there. So the city has used it as its piggy bank for decades, and a lot of money is actually owed to the utility. So I think it's the fairness that half the people don't have any voice, the people outside of city limits. And also, until just a year or two ago, the city restricted any alternative energy hookups to the utility. Now that's changed, but so I think it's just most people don't want the utility subject to the vagaries of different administrations anymore. We want to own it. We want the best price. We want the best service. Thank you.
Okay, any responses to that?
Yeah, the one thing I would like to, don't want to echo those. So each year in our budget, we have two line items, a payment in lieu of tax and an admin fee. And so from the base of the electric utility, that admin fee goes to pay for the time outside of the electric utility that individuals put into that work. So my time, Suli's time as the finance director, IT equipment, Microsoft Office, we pay for all of those under a big umbrella as the city. And so the admin fee is a price that goes into that to pay the electric utility's usage of that. One of the things that we've been doing as a council or as a city and as administration is in this recent budget, we've been trying to chip away at that admin fee by bringing positions all underneath the electric department. So this past winter, when did we do that? January 1st, people inside city limits may have noticed that they started receiving two bills, one for water, one for sewer. And so that was an intentional, one for water, one for electric. That was an intentional move so that we can move all of the billing and all of those things under the electric utility so that the finance department's time wasn't as bogged down with it. And instead, that could stay inside the electric utility and be paid for by the electric utility rather than paying a portion of time beyond that. But I definitely understand your point about utilizing those those fees in more appropriate ways under the electric utility. Yeah.
Okay. One more.
Thank you. Bruce Jaffa, ratepayer. To be clear, I'm really happy that you've begun this process. When there was an earlier effort to look at a different model for managing the utility, it's not surprising that question number one was this or any future activity be clear and transparent. Along with that, I would like you to explain the genesis of how we got here tonight, because I don't remember a public upwelling, saying, okay, 2 years after the last thing, now we're ready to do something else. If it's there, I'd like you to explain how you guys decided to sit here tonight to bring this potential co-op to us.
Well, that's kind of an easy one for me to answer. So the reason we're here tonight isn't over starting a co-op or anything else. It's ever since I got here about a year ago, everyone's been explaining to me that the last process wasn't transparent, They don't know what's going on with the utility. They don't know why the rates are the way they are. And so I just thought, well, why don't we start having community meetings and just talk about this stuff and just figure out what the community wants. We do want to have some kind of direction moving forward. I mean, Brian and I are contractors working down here. It'd be nice to, figure out what direction the community wants so we can plan our lives around that and stuff. But this meeting isn't just about starting a co-op or selling the co-op. It's about answering the questions that you have, and just so we can have a good, transparent dialogue with the community.
And I just to add to that, I think, I think we should be clear, as I stated earlier, there are three, what I would say is that the status quo is probably not sustainable in the long term. Having Matanuska Electric contract with the city to provide resources to manage the co-op, right, or the utility, that's not what Matanuska Electric does. They're an electric co-op. But this was sort of in the spirit of co-ops and helping munis, that they're undertaking this. And so I think the current situation is probably not sustainable. I think the choice the community has is to try to go back to the status quo, but fund it and operate it in a way that gets the stuff done that needs to get done, which frankly hasn't been happening for a long time. That's one option. The other option is sell it to one of the other utilities, like the folks before us had thought was a good idea. And then the third option, and the reason we brought co-ops in tonight to talk about them is talk about them tonight is that the first two options are probably fairly well understood by the community because you've been through that. The co-op is sort of a newer concept, not a new concept, but new in the context of what would Seward do. And so there is a choice here for three options. I think the current situation is not sustainable over the long term where you're contracting out the management to one of the other co-ops in the rail belt. That's just how it is. So I don't know, Bruce, if I answered your question there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, perfect explanation, and thank you. I don't want anybody to go forward thinking that this is some sort of a dark process. That somebody's running out ahead of everybody else with some crazy idea. I don't think that's what's happening. So a specific question for our guests tonight who have, I believe, established some co-ops in areas where there was private or city ownership in the past. Seward may be unique, and I'd like you to address this specific issue in that almost half the ratepayers are not able to vote on the actual sale or concept. So did any of the other co-ops have that difficulty? And if so, how did they deal with it?
I'll be honest, I don't know for sure, but in Cordova, if you're a registered voter, even if you're outside the city limits, you still vote in the city elections. And so I think when it was a city-managed utility, they did have a voice in how the utility was governed. So.
Does Jamie or Linda have an answer to that or any reflection?
This is Linda. I would say that Kodiak made a very conscious decision when our co-op was formed to make sure it was a co-op as opposed to something that was regulated or operated by the city of Kodiak, because even at that point, many of the members were going to be outside city limits, and they wanted everybody to have an equal voice in the co-op.
I think Jamie has a quick thing.
Yeah, and we weren't initially city-run, but I would just speak to it from, we have district lines because we have half of our service territory in Valdez that is under the city of Valdez government, and the rest is Copper Basin. But we kind of looked at it rate-wise. If you have a distribution service to your house, that is really what the vote, I guess, would count. But we're a little bit different because we were never run or managed by the city.
Okay, Clay.
I was just going to mention, we don't have a borough in Cordova, and I don't think Copper Valley does either. So voters, that's why everybody votes in a municipal election, because there's no borough to represent them outside of it.
Hi, my question is, what is our potential in the Seward area for generating power with renewable sources?
I'll take that, and maybe Taylor, you can follow on. But, you know, from my perspective, after I came down here, we started looking around, and there are 5 or 6 streams. You know, you've got Godwin, 4th of July, Marathon, Lowell, Scheffler, Jap, and there's a Grant Lake hydroelectric project that's already been licensed, and it doesn't seem like Homer is actually going to construct on that license. So there are a number of hydroelectric resources here. I think to develop those is a 25-year project. But at the end of that time, I think Seward would be in a situation much like Cordova is now, where you could be exporting power into the grid or promoting economic growth by lowering rates for industry to come to Seward. If you were to undertake, as Cordova did 25 years ago, the construction of those. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for that. And yeah, well, I'll leave it at that. I think there's a lot of hydro that could be done. There's obviously wind, solar have their place. I'm certainly support those technologies as well. And then on the horizon in the coming, maybe this decade, but certainly the next, will be the small modular reactors, nuclear reactors that are, you know, under experimental license in various parts of the country and being tested at several of them at Idaho National Labs over the next couple of years.
Both of the others talked about how in the winter they had to revert to using fuel only. Would that be a similar situation with the hydro we have available?
Yeah, I think the Grant Lake hydro project that was proposed by Homer is a storage project. I concur with what Clay said. I think run of the river is much more doable, but that does involve a thermal generating component, which is diesel, and there's going to have to be a parallel strategy with hydro development to maintain and replace the existing thermal units as you move forward. You know, that is, if we're talking about 25 years, you know, when the hydro's not available, you're going to want to have an efficient thermal plant to back them up. And obviously on Cordova, on Kodiak, they're doing that with wind and batteries. So there's some mix of all of that. You know, I think we're well on our way installing this 12 megawatt 2-hour battery. That's going to provide during the non-cruise ship season, middle May through mid-October. I'm sorry, the non-cruise ship season, which is mid-October through mid-May. It's going to provide an energy storage resource that you could use to coordinate those. So there's a lot. It's a bright future here. I think the community has a bright future.
I'd also like to add, in Cordova and Kodiak, they're on islands, so they can't purchase power from the greater rail belt grid. So that's why they have to fall back onto diesel. We, depending on the outcome or the situation, wouldn't necessarily have to fall back to running the generators in the winter because of the run of the river.
Yeah, good point. Only when the line dam,
Yeah,
Dave's
line's
Creek is
down.
out, which is fairly infrequently. I apologize. I should have made that clear. Thanks.
No, good.
Hi, Rhonda Hubbard, Inside City Limits, reluctant ratepayer here. This question is for Clay. I wonder if you could speak to what efficiencies you saw or didn't see, or I'm sure you saw them, going from a municipal-run utility to a co-op-run utility. And what were some of the big differences that you could point to on that? And the benefits.
I'll see how quickly I can unpack this. It's, you know, it was a transition, and I would say a little reluctant at first. There was a perception that the electric utility and the telephone utility, which both formed cooperatives, were subsidizing the city. I mean, now very clearly it's revenue positive for the city to have the cooperative separate. Initially, the debt, you know, the cooperative was formed, they assumed a lot of debt that they had to pay back, but the city got a huge cash infusion. They bought the utility right. So that money transferred to the city. We have now a 7% sales tax in Cordova. Even though Cordova Electric is tax exempt, we sell the energy as the product, so that's taxable. So we generate well over $300,000 a year in sales tax to the city. We've been able to bring in funding to help the city in various ways, and I'm speaking more of the now. The city did a big harbor project, invested very heavily in that, and I think we charged $50,000 or $60,000 for relocation, but we more than matched that with just upgrades we did to our system to put new equipment there, to put it and move it to places where it wasn't blocking parking spots and so forth. So I'd say initially it was a little rough. The co-ops kept all the billing for all the city, so the staff really just kind of separated. The co-ops did all the water, sewer, garbage billing. They took a lot of the administrative effort with them from the city. Over time, a lot of that transferred back to the city. I can say initially Cordova Electric when I started there 27 years ago, they had 23 employees. Right now we have 15. We'd like a couple more linemen. So I would say the efficiency, I think the focus improved. So, you know, when we set a new rate case, we make sure that we communicate that broadly to the community, but we also sit down with our biggest ratepayers. The city's one of those. Their aggregated facilities and loads is probably our single biggest ratepayer. And those conversations, because we were able to just focus on energy, we could be a lot more strategic in how we made energy investments and structured rates in a way that they would best benefit our businesses and our city. So, yeah.
Did you find that it was, going to the co-op, that there was maybe a better, like you said focus, but maybe professional or understanding at the co-op level versus the municipal level? Because the representation at the municipal level, what I see, they're trying to make decisions on a lot of different things. Yes. And sometimes I mean, I know I wouldn't be qualified if I was up on the dais, and I think there's a lot of people that are scratching their head when they're making decisions. So at the co-op level, where do you find people that could focus better and make those decisions?
Absolutely, and that kind of was what I was trying to articulate a little bit as the focus. When you have 7, at-large board members that are elected from the community, they just focus on the electric utility. They're reading just the electric utilities financials. They're getting training from the national and statewide organization, a lot of it distance now, to better learn and understand. So energy is very, very complex. It's fairly highly regulated. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's expensive. And so I think they've been able to focus. But there's also one less layer. You know, as a CEO, I work directly for the board of directors. I don't have to work through a city manager and then to a board. So that's one less filter. It's one less, and city managers have a lot on their plate as well. So I feel like it is much more efficient organizationally. And again, the cooperatives are structured to have a lot of cookbook set patterns and a broad network of others to work with. So definitely decision-making efficiency. Just to close the loop on that question about our new rate structure, you know, our CFO very deeply understands the energy part. She was able to structure that rate in 2 weeks, took it to our board of directors. They understood and approved it. We advertised it for 30 days, sat down with our key customers, and we started on that in August, and we had a rate published by October 1st. That is a strong signal to a struggling seafood industry. The co-op is responsive, they're listening, they're adapting and supporting the business. So I think that's one advantage.
I'd like to add to that as well. While I have learned more about electricity and energy in the past 2 years than I ever thought imaginable, it is nothing in comparison to a lifetime of work in that industry that we see in everybody else at this table. So I, as the city manager, have that ultimate pass-through between council and the utility, but it's a lot of leaning on those with the knowledge that comes from years of experience.
We have one question here for maybe some folks online. What kinds of partnerships with industry, such as fish processors, tourism, data centers, could help lower rates if Seward controlled its own generation? Linda or Jamie, want to take that one? Then we can move to Clay.
I'll go ahead and start. We work closely with our fish processors. We have an industrial rate for them. They're the backbone of our community. We've done some innovative things so that they can lower their costs as well as the amount of energy that they have to use to do their processing. I'm not an engineer. Clay could probably explain it better than I can. I'm the policy person on our board. But we have put tools in place to help our processing industry. We've got a relatively new dock in Kodiak that the cruise ships come to. They plug in now rather than running their generators, and that helps our utility. When our cargo company, Matson, who brings the big containers in, comes to port now, they used to run their crane on a diesel generator. We now provide electricity through that to them in a partnership with the city of Kodiak, with Matson, and with Kodiak Electric Association. We each put in a significant amount of money to make that project work. And we've got some innovative technical things that have gone with that project because we didn't initially have the capacity to add them to our system. So we pick up those partnerships wherever we can to both provide lower rates where we can, but also to stabilize the system. Thanks.
I would say just a few things similar, but just to add on examples. Our probably most recent example is the Alyeska Valdez Marine Terminal connection. Just working on that partnership of we've never served them power, and they're looking at it as their aging infrastructure as well, and they are not in the power generation industry. They're in the oil refining business. So that has been 5 years in the making. That makes it a win-win both ways. So when we have excess hydro, they can use our cheaper hydro to burn off diesel vapors as part of their process. Right now, they're using expensive diesel to do that. And then on the flip side, in the wintertime, when they have excess power, they can shift that back to us. So we continue to have several discussions with various partners, from electric vehicle rates to, again, seafood processing and industrial. So we're open to those discussions right now. Even the city, they're looking at various housing options. They're adding, Coast Guard is looking at possibly expanding. So just keeping that dialogue open for those potential future partnerships.
I would say over the last 2 or 3 years, our biggest gains have actually been internally. We've been able to really get some new efficiencies out of our hydros that we didn't realize were there. And we've upgraded our diesel plant, so we've been able to go from 75 to 80 to now 85% hydro. If there was a line connecting Cordova to another grid, we would be selling a lot more excess hydropower than we would be buying in diesel to get us through the year. We are pretty much the tip of the spear in the state for integrating data servers. We have fiber connectivity, we have some small plant floor space, and we're spilling a lot of excess hydropower. I've been looking for decades for a place to sell it, and this is a big opportunity, I think, not just for Cordova, but for a lot of Alaska. I know Cordova Telecom is building another fiber to Seward. That I think is going to be done probably the next 18, 24 months, and then they're running a fiber south to Juneau and hitting several small communities. So we did a small data build inside a hydro plant where we can cool it with the water there. And we're looking at a larger AI build now that would sell, even in their first phase, they would be purchasing about what our entire seafood industry purchases. So that's a way for us to really better utilize the expensive investments we have in our plant. And it helps us diversify our economy. So when fishing gets bad, that puts pressure on our rates. And the last thing we want to do when our seafood industry is struggling is raise electric rates on us. So now we're just being able to diversify our economy. And co-ops in general are pretty high adopters of innovation. We installed a battery energy storage system to balance our whole grid, and that was one piece of unlocking our hydro capacity, and it's way more than paying its way in diesel fuel savings to have that kind of complex piece of equipment on our grid.
Just one point. I think the common theme throughout all of this is growing your load, your electrical usage. And you know, I would always say rule number one in the electric business is grow your load. And the reason is, as long as you grow your load and it's within the capacity of the existing equipment you have, and all of your equipment is sized to specific standards. So generally when you hit a certain capacity, you don't utilize all that capacity. So if you can grow your load, you're spreading those dollars, you're spreading those costs over a larger body of kilowatt hours that you're selling, and so the rate for the kilowatt hours goes down. So these folks are all talking about grow your load, because then you're spreading those fixed costs over a bigger pool of kilowatt hours, and the actual dollars per kilowatt hour go down. And that's why in the electric utility industry, guys go, rule number one, grow your load. If you can grow your load, you can keep rates lower, and that kind of goes back to our survey where we talked about predictable and stable rates.
I'm Bob Linville. I've been an inside city limits ratepayer since 1981. Never missed a payment, any of those months. A long time. And interestingly, my first job in this town was as an IBW electrician. It was on the hydro project up there on the bench, and that went on. Well, we put a electric boiler into the hospital. That's what we were going to do with the hydro. That was in 1981, and in 1982 we actually built that. I can assure you that it did work, because we ran the whole test with all the engineers. Total working facility when the city took possession. I'm not sure if it ever worked again after that. I think it was just rediscovered recently by this very stellar panel we have here. Taylor, I think, is awesome. Kat's awesome. And maybe we can get that thing fired up again after 43 years. But one, I think, way to analyze that is I don't think cities are really good at changing the status quo and finding the money to build large hydro projects, large from our perspective, small by everybody else's. But we have the potential here to do that, and it just, what Clay was just saying about the data centers, I mean, there's so much opportunity to lower your rates. So the other thing I wanted to say is I've been a ratepayer in Cordova now since 2007. We bought a building for our business over there.
How many bills have you missed there?
Huh?
How many bills have you missed there?
I didn't hear that.
How many bills have you missed there?
I don't miss any bills. They've all been paid. But, when we started in 2007, there was quite a difference between the grid here that we're on, we're on the whole rail belt grid, and Cordova was quite a bit higher. And I got the bills that I just got this last month here, if anybody wants to see them. It's pretty close to the same now. Cordova's been just kind of doing this, and the whole grid's been doing this, and we're just crossing paths right now. So if we kind of go on the status quo, I'm pretty sure in 15 or 20 more years, our grid's going to be up here, and Cordova's still going to be down here. And the hydro did that. Like Clay said, it took a long time to get ahead of the debt, but they're ahead of it. And I just walked up to that dam because our kids live there now. I took them over there to fish when they're little, and they all moved over there. And anyway, I saw how much water was going over that dam just in the last week. And that could be sold. I mean, the whole town is being supplied right now. The seafood industry's kind of wound down. There's 2 feet of water across a big, wide spillway that's just spilling down into the creek that could go through the pipe and generate power. And so there's a lot of opportunity with that. They have to have all that water when they need it for the industry. But I had one question. I didn't just come up here to give a speech. And my question is, do you know an example of a well-run municipal utility in the state of Alaska that is developing hydro and getting the rates down with lots of future opportunity?
I think, well, it's funny because I've actually had several municipalities calling me over the last 3 or 4 years asking about cooperatives, but I think Ketchikan Public Utilities has the lowest rates in the state. I think it's fairly well run. But I will say the lion's share of their energy comes from the Southeast Electric Power Agency, so SEPA. So they're getting most of their energy from a cooperative there. Same with Wrangell and Petersburg. But I think what's more important, a better way to answer is I've seen municipalities that have been bright stars for a few years, and then they go through a really rough patch, and then they go through a good patch, and it really depends on the managers and the staff at the time, and there's been a lot of turnover. I'd say as I look around the cooperatives and look at myself that's been at Cordova for 27 years, Jamie at Copper Valley for good stretch of time, it feels like there's maybe a little more stability and continuity there. So I'll just answer it that way. And I'm not trying to sell one model or the other. I just want to answer questions as honestly as I can from my perspective.
Linda or Jamie have anything to add? Okay.
I can add that the average lifespan of a city manager in Alaska is 2 years in every community. I do hope and plan to serve longer than that, but the average is a real thing, and that turnover causes disruption to plans such as long-term hydro power development.
Interesting question. Okay.
Hi, my name is Bob Barnwell. I'm with the City Council. I first off want to say I've been on there 3 years. I have one more year to go. Being on the council is frustrating with the electrical because we watch the city managers and we rotate through city managers. We rotate through the city council members every 3 to 6 years. And we fail or have a really hard time with the long-term vision of the electricity. And what you guys are doing is talking about long-term goals and long-term vision. And I think this system and the way we're organized, it doesn't do well for that. So I just want to put that out there. That's my 2 cents on that. The question I have for you guys is, we know that Cook Inlet gas is diminishing quickly, and how does that influence, or how should Seward look at that as a long-range issue in terms of separating or becoming independent of the rail belt? So, thanks.
I preface this by saying I wouldn't recommend that you separate from the rail belt. I do think that in the near term, and 10 or 20 years, I'm talking near term, not 40 or 50 years out, Cook Inlet natural gas will be gone. And in the interim, we will import liquefied natural gas either from Canada or the Australian Northwest Shelf. It will probably be less, prices will be less predictable than they have been in the past. And that's the COPA on your bill. The COPA makes up about 40% of your bill. So when natural gas prices double, 40% of your bill will double. And it isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over a period of years. Gas isn't going to run out in 2028, but there will be no long-term contracts under the current situation past that. Now, if they build a AKLNG pipeline, that's kind of an exogenous shock and a different deal. But even I think AKLNG gas will be comparable to what the liquefied natural gas on the Pacific market is. So that's got a significant increase over what we have today. So fundamentally, to answer your question in the short term, short answer is prices are going to go up on the COPA. And I think that when you look at long-term hydroelectric investment, the capital investment in hydroelectric projects is high. Not as high for run-of-the-river as it is for storage projects like Cooper Lake and Eklutna and Bradley. Those are much higher. But capital investments are high, but the fuel is free. You can say the same about wind and solar, but wind and solar are not dispatchable. That means they can't be turned on and turned off whenever you need them. Energy storage can help with that, but it doesn't get you from season to season. So I think as a hedge against rising fuel prices, development of hydroelectric, particularly when you have a plethora of opportunities, is probably a good investment. But to, I think, the point Clay made and some of the other folks have made, it requires a steady hand for a couple decades. You're not gonna get there in 5 years, you know, you gotta permit there's a lot of things you have to do, I won't get into the details, but it requires a steady hand and a focus on that's what you're gonna do as a community. And that's just, I'll leave it at that. But I wouldn't say you would disconnect from the rail belt. Ideally, you would be selling low-cost hydroelectric energy into the rail belt and lowering your costs that way.
Hi, Phil Galuza in town. I guess to answer that one question about muni utilities, I did spend 6 years on the Nome Joint Utility Board and 6 years on the City Council, and they've been operating fairly well for 60, 80 years. So, I mean, it is doable. I think the one little issue that needs to get resolved is even though it's an elected utility board, dealing with outside of city limits, I think, was still a bit of an issue. Now, whether or not that's insurmountable, I don't know that, if that's a legal issue or not, but it is a utility that's got a wind farm and fairly progressive and doing what they can up there in the far north. So, thanks.
And John Handlin has been there for like 25 years, and that's part of the continuity. That's the difference. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Are there any more questions from in the room? One more here.
Yeah, I got a comment first and then a question. Comment is that thank you for putting this on, and it's a lot. I know there've been a lot of 10, 12-minute presentations in front of council, but it doesn't compete with this. One thing I would like to comment though is a lot of people don't do scanny things on their phone or the barcode thingy. You're lucky I can text. I got testimony, how many? But people, whether you live inside or outside the city limits, are welcome to speak for 3 minutes before city council and 5 minutes after city council. So if you have a comment about or a question about the electric, go ahead and show up at a council meeting or show up and talk to one of these, Taylor, or just go into the electric department and ask them. Second of all, is my question is, and we can start with, the 3 utilities that are here that are co-op. I'm kind of curious. Do you charge more or the same rate for small businesses as residential, and is it a different rate to read the meter box?
For our small businesses, very small businesses. The larger businesses, I would say when we would do our rate studies and stuff, they were kind of paying more than their share. So our last big rate change before last year, we reduced their rates 20% and raised seafood processors 20%. So they pay a slightly higher meter fee, but a lower kilowatt hour rate in business than in residential. And I have to say, we are a power cost equalization community, so the residential rate class gets a little bit of relief from the state. But I would also say that our rates have stayed so flat for so long. Cordova was the single largest recipient, and now we're way down the list. We're slowly getting less and less, and I hope we get to the point where we get no state influx, because I'd rather not have that risk, and frankly, there's probably other communities that need it more, so.
Jamie, did you have something to add, or Linda?
As just a CFO for most of my career and all in the electric industry, we have pretty industry standards for going through what we call a cost of service study. Regulated utilities are required to do that more often. We do 3 to 5 years just for good general practice, and what it does is it accumulates all the costs versus the revenue for the various rate classes. So just like building infrastructure to a seafood processing requires a lot more dollars than to a residential service, and we just make sure that the rate classes are within reason. I think generally, big picture, there is large commercial that subsidizes residential, but in our last rate study, for example, we found a similar thing as Clay mentioned, and so our focus on rates, we're actually in the middle of we're in the 3rd year of a 5-year rate change. rather than rip off the Band-Aid and do a double-digit increase, what we did is spread that over 5 years so it was more manageable. And those increases were to our residential members. So that's a little bit about the process. It's pretty defined. And for regulated utilities, it's even more defined because they have to present their case to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, which is not an easy thing to do. To answer kind of the second part of your question, are they paying the same fee to read their meters? There's a lot that goes into that for billing. We actually read ours remotely, as Taylor was mentioning, a project for Seward. We know we call it the customer charge, does not cover the entire bill. For example, for residential, we charge $20. We know that charge should be more in the $50 range. What would happen though is there'd be a lower cost per kilowatt hour for usage. So we're seeing a general trend go that way. We've just, again, that's at the decision of our board to decide what to do, but very standard practices for rate making in the industry.
Go ahead, Linda.
And we have similar structures. We have a customer charge that's the same for every customer on our system. It does not pay for our fixed cost. We thought about doing a survey for fees, and we just haven't done that because there will be winners and losers, and we have enough money coming in. Our customer charge is $7.50 a month, regardless of who you are. Then we have two other charges. We have a energy use charge, and that's a per kilowatt charge. And we do have different rate classes. So our large industrial rate class pays a different rate than our industrial rate class. And we have what's called a cost of power adjustment, a COPA rate. And that essentially is a fairly small rate because it's based on our diesel usage. So unless something goes down and we need to run the diesels for an extended period of time, the COPA is quite a small amount, and it's based on the energy rate. Our current per kilowatt hour for residential is 18 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's after we did our rate increase back in April. So we have a very relatively low rate for our residential users. Our large power users, because they use so much power, actually have a little bit lower rate, but the volume makes up for it in terms of what they pay us. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. I was hoping the city of Seward at some point would consider giving year-round businesses a little bit of a break. I really like how Cordova, well, 2 or 3 of you mentioned that the commercial fishing is your backbone.
Yes.
Used to be ours, now it's tourism. And I like how you bent over backwards for the commercial fishing and the processors. But in Seward, we have a lack of year-round businesses. I own one of the few. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, year-round business is a little different because we have a seasonal rate. Because we use more diesel in the winter, we lower the rates quite a bit, 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour in the winters, specifically to take that fuel cost burden off of our year-round residents, year-round businesses.
Seward does that too, and I actually like that they do that. And I think that a lot of the comments for people wanting to be transparent, I think that was directed in what happened before, not current. And I like how transparent and how much information you guys have put out since you've been here. And yep, thank you.
One more question here.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that a little bit. I know you haven't been in Seward a long time, the city manager. There's a lot of history to it, and I don't think that $2 and $3 million that they took out of the electricity fund this year is all going for paperwork expenses or accounting. It went to 2 different funds, and the history of the utility is pretty fraught with scandals. You know, the North Dock was paid for out of the electric utility, and there's dozens and more over the years. And the point is that it's been a piggy bank for the city for a long time, and that has to stop for the ratepayers. We have to co-op it. That's basically the only logical option in my mind. and quit have those millions get raked off every year. That's $1,000 for every ratepayer what they raked off this year. So I don't think I don't think we can trust the city anymore. It's too variable, too many different people. Like I said, 2 years for city managers, 2 years for the council and stuff. Everybody has a different idea. We need steadiness and reliability, and I don't think the city can do it. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Do you have one more?
I'm not sure who can answer this, but what's the downside of forming a co-op, other than the large debt possibly incurred? I'm hearing so many pros that, you know, there's gotta be maybe a downside.
Yeah, you know, I think I would say and we will over the coming months work out a business plan and an analysis of each of the three alternatives. With my history, my experience, my guess is that in the short term, the next several years, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, the co-op option would be more expensive than selling to one of the other utilities in the rail belt. I think over the long run, if the co-op takes on a capital improvement program to diversify generation, you could very well come out cheaper in the long run, but more expensive in the short run. I think that's probably the main difference. There's also, you know, it's going to be an effort. Yeah. You know, there's going to be negotiation, there's going to be contracts, you're going to get bond counsel involved, you're going to have lots of lawyers in the room talking about how all this really works. So it isn't just going to happen overnight, like today we're a muni, tomorrow we're a co-op. So there's an effort. It's going to take time away from the folks at the city who would be working on something else otherwise. Council's going to have a lot of time involved in it. So I think, you know, it's not just going to happen overnight. Yeah, so I would leave it at that. I think at the end of the day, probably selling to one of the other utilities in the short term would get you lower rates. In the long term, maybe not so much. If you form a co-op and you develop a plan and stay the course for 25 years, you end up in probably a better place with local control and the ability to use the co-op to stimulate economic growth. Now, that wasn't a downside. You were asking for the cons. I'm sorry, I keep going back to that, but the cons are it's a lot of work, and in the short term, probably more expensive than just selling the utility.
How about Jamie or Linda? Any comments from you on that question?
I'd say that the downsides that the co-op faces in Kodiak are the same things that the municipality would face, and that is finding qualified employees. There's not a lot of linemen out there these days. And so finding good qualified employees is something that we work really hard at. And finding good qualified committed board members. It's like making sure that you've got people that are engaged on your board and are really involved. And you don't have a lot of control over that, but that's going to be an issue whether you're a co-op or a muni. And they're just things you need to recognize as you go in deciding what kind of form you want to have.
Okay, Clay or Jamie, or go ahead, Clay.
I just say, put my former mayor's hat on. I think there are things the city does really well. I think there's a higher level of accountability in municipal governments. You generally have a lot of people at the city council meetings. It's not unusual to go through a whole year and have maybe 1 or 2 members show up to the co-op the whole time. One thing about a co-op structure is everybody becomes an equity owner in the cooperative. So you actually own a physical part of electric utility, and as that debt's paid off, you own equity in it. So most co-ops maintain a real high level of accountability to their members, but they kind of have to do it themselves. There's not a lot of policing, and there's some co-ops around the country, none I can think of in Alaska, that have run horribly amok, started just overcompensating themselves, going on a lot of trips, and eventually ending up in court in front of their members. So not all co-ops are created perfect, and it still does take some level of member and customer holding them accountable. And but as Linda mentioned, asking a small community to source 7 more board members to serve on a co-op board as you're trying to fill 7 council seats, it puts more on the community, so.
Jamie, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to echo kind of some of that is, one thing that, again, it all relates back to positive, but as a co-op and the co-op spirit, it's really about culture. It's about community. It is about making a difference. And I think that's a little bit of a vision that makes a co-op different. We really run on that principle. It comes back to board members. I was just looking the other day, and I have my highest board member has been on there 27 years. I have one 20 years. I have a couple that's 4 and 6 years, but it does bring continuity in that long-term vision. And a challenge is aging infrastructure, which we're handling, and our approach is be transparent, open. Everybody wants to keep the lights on, but the community, we do need people, and it's the same people that are coaching basketball and giving to their community in another way. So sometimes those resources are spread pretty thin.
Okay, Brian, you want to give us some closing remarks here? And if anybody wants to still fill out your contact information for the drawing here, the box is up here, you can pop it in here. Go ahead.
Sure. So tonight is just the first step. As I stated a few times tonight, this is going to be an ongoing process. Hopefully, we'd like to bring this to some sort of conclusion in spring or summer of 2026, either through a council vote or a ballot measure or some other means, so the community has decided where they want to go with their cooperative. Did I say that?
You said cooperative.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. That's not me going for the cooperative. I just have been working in cooperatives for so many years, it like comes out of my mouth. But be sure to sign up for and receive updates. We really need your email addresses. We found that we have very few of them as we went through this. So put your email address on a card and you get to win that beautiful door prize over there maybe. Share your thoughts with your friends and neighbors. Talk to people who aren't here tonight, who didn't come or might not come, and let's broaden this conversation. There's a whole lot of people out there, and we really need everybody in the community to come together and make a decision here. This process only works if it actually reflects if it's just us up here talking, we're not getting there. It needs to reflect the views of the community. And our commitment is simple. This is going to be an open and transparent process. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be interesting, a lot of fun, a lot of work, and we're going to do our very best.
I have a question. If folks here want to meet with you or ask more specific questions or talk about their ideas here in Seward, where should they go?
Come to the electric department. Either Taylor or I or Kat. We'll be there. So someone will be there.
Their truck's always there. Even at night, always.
Thank you, Tim McDonald. Theoretically, if the city agreed to turn over the electrical utility to a co-op, which would have to be formed first, for $10, a nominal amount, would that speed up the process quite a bit as far as taking 10 years to do it?
Well, I don't think it would take 10 years to do the co-op. Let me be clear about that. It's not a 10-year project. It's probably a 2-year project. And I don't, I wouldn't get into those details at this point in time. I think, you need to look at how that would all play out as far as balance sheet, and do you then not have a balance sheet? I can think of a lot of questions I would have so that's a thought.
It'd be a lot easier for the ratepayers if it was just transferred to us with no cost to the city. The city doesn't need it, and the people outside of town have been paying for the city for decades and decades. So it makes sense from a fairness perspective too.
Thank you for that. I think so. Today in planning this event, various folks were coming from meetings, and I know Linda was on a ferry earlier, and Clay had to do all kinds of trains, planes, and automobiles and boats to get here. So I want to thank Jamie and Linda and Clay. Let's give them all a round of applause. I know, they did great being in the hot seat. And then maybe Clay, since you're our honored guest here tonight in the live in person, will you draw name here.
Kind of like being mayor, you're gonna make one person happy and a whole bunch of people. There's one more to go in there.
So quick.
Last call.
Yeah, mix it up. Yeah.
We'll have independent,
Oh, didn't even look.
Patrick Guilfoyle. All right. These folks will be here for a little while longer if you want to have a snack and chat with folks here. Thank you so much for coming.